On a Sunday morning in late May 2014, hundreds of joyful people piled into the First Unitarian Church of Portland, Oregon. A judge had recently legalized marriage equality in Oregon, and the atmosphere in the church was electric, full of love and all the emotion of those who had fought for justice for so long. The mood was made even more celebratory by the fact that two of the plaintiffs on the case in Oregon were members of the First Unitarian Church. I still remember that Sunday vividly in my mind. I was sitting packed in the pews, sandwiched between family and friends, arms wrapped around each other. Congregants shared testimonies of their love from the pulpit, and we sang and danced and sang some more, and when the benediction was finally proclaimed, we all made our way down to the social hall, where we drank sparkling cider and had cupcakes in a special wedding reception-themed coffee hour. Pure, unadulterated joy. As many of you probably know, Unitarian Universalists have long been involved in the fight for LGBTQ marriage equality. In fact, 10 years before marriage equality came to Oregon, when Massachusetts became the first state to legalize marriage equality in 2004, 7 of the 14 plaintiffs on that case were Unitarian Universalists. The work that UUs have done around the country to promote marriage equality is an incredible testament to what can be done when we live out our deepest principles about the inherent worth and dignity of all people. The Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church community has itself long supported LGBTQ equality. Like the First Unitarian Church in Portland, Mount Diablo is recognized by the Unitarian Universalist Association as a welcoming congregation. This means that we welcome all people here, especially those who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. As a welcoming congregation, we recognize that LGBTQ people have often been the victims of religious violence, and we strive through advocacy and education to make our congregation one where all people are celebrated, one where you don't have to leave your identity at the door with the ushers passing out the church bulletins on Sunday morning. This is a community that strives to live into the words of Rumi, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come." These are bold words. Whoever you are, come, yet again, come. However, history, as we know, is complicated. It was not always this way in our UU churches. LGBTQ people have not always been welcome to the extent they are today. In fact, the Welcoming Congregation program of the UUA arose out of a 1987 survey that was done of UU views pertaining to gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. While those survey results from 1987 suggested that a majority of UUs were comfortable worshiping alongside gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, the survey also showed that most UUs were much less comfortable with the idea of voting to call a gay, lesbian, or bisexual minister. In the same survey, 28% of gay and lesbian respondents and 41% of bisexual respondents said they experienced limited acceptance within the UUA. The Welcoming Congregation program itself was born in response to this survey, which showed that even in our own progressive spiritual community, there was still work to be done for equality. So much has unfolded in the years since that first Welcoming Congregation program in 1990 and that Sunday morning at First Unitarian Church in 2014. So much progress toward a vision of a world where people are loved for who they are. October is LGBTQ History Month, and this coming week on October 11th, we will celebrate National Coming Out Day. And in this period of celebrating and also of remembering history, while we honor all that has been accomplished in the name of human rights, we must also ask ourselves, where do we still have to go? What does it mean to be a truly welcoming congregation in 2017? Although marriage equality has been achieved, discrimination and violence against LGBTQ people certainly has not been eradicated. In our ever-polarized political environment, LGBTQ people continue to be targets of social and religious conservatives who promote language and legislation that is dehumanizing at best and life-threatening at worst. The President of the United States is currently working to implement his proposed ban on transgender people serving in the military, while cities and states around the country are embroiled in debates over who is allowed to use public restrooms. At least 22 transgender people were murdered in 2016, and transgender women of color are the most likely to be targets of this kind of horrific violence. According to a 2015 survey, gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth experienced higher rates of violence and bullying in schools and were 5 times more likely than their straight counterparts to attempt suicide. Just yesterday, I had the privilege of attending the Welcoming School Summit in Concord, an annual event hosted by the Rainbow Community Center, a nonprofit organization that supports LGBTQ youth here in Contra Costa County. In an afternoon panel, I had the privilege of listening to youth from the Rainbow Center share their own experiences of coming out in their families, in their churches, in their homes. The tears that these youth shed telling the stories of courage and strength and also of fear and discrimination made it very clear that even in a state like California, there is still a lot of work to be done. Clearly, being a welcoming congregation in 2017 still requires us to show up and demand justice far beyond our own church walls. And being a welcoming congregation in 2017 also requires us to reflect thoughtfully on what justice looks like within our own church walls as well. What do we do to ensure that all people feel truly welcomed here? In a course on transgender inclusion, the Reverend Michael Slack and Alex Capitan reflect on the idea of welcoming as a spiritual practice. For them, welcoming means doing the work to build the beloved community here in our congregation. It means doing our best to avoid stereotypes and inaccurate assumptions about others. It means respecting people for how they identify themselves. It means being okay with some discomfort and uncertainty. It means making mistakes and coming back anyway. One example of the way in which this congregation is working to be even more welcoming is by including people's preferred pronouns on their name tags in coffee hour, a project which the LGBTQ and Friends Committee has undertaken. When someone shares their pronouns, either out loud or on a name tag, it means that they do not operate on the assumption that they can know someone else's gender identity without asking. You see, we make a lot of assumptions in the society about what it means to be a man or a woman, a lot of assumptions that erase the experiences of people who may not fit so well into those traditional gender categories. Assumptions are dangerous. So much of what it means to be a welcoming congregation has to do with this, examining our own automatic assumptions about what is normal and who we think belongs. This kind of learning does not come easily to most of us, myself included. Even in communities committed to inclusion, there is always more to learn. There are always new horizons. The journey is lifelong for us all. This reality of the slow and unsteady nature of social change is one that can be unsettling and disheartening, to those of us religious liberals who like to believe in the power of human reason to solve our earthly problems. However, the long record of history shows that progress is simply not onward and upward forever, as the 19th century Unitarian minister James Freeman Clarke once wrote. Rather, it begins and stops in fits and starts. We step forward and soon again fall backward. While the old adages about change being inevitable may be true, progress towards building the beloved community is not. It requires continual, ongoing work. I say continual, ongoing work because I think this is another challenge that religious liberals like myself face. The belief that a victory for positive social change indicates that the struggle against oppression is over. This belief is so profoundly tempting because how wonderful would it be if it were true? But the truth is, we know that the election of Barack Obama as President of the United States did not end racism in this country any more than the legalization of marriage equality ended homophobia. Two things can be true at once. Society can become more just in certain ways, and inequality can still persist in others. Does this make you, like me, feel as though you are forced to live in the Greek myth of Sisyphus? As though all of us have been condemned by the gods to spend our lives pushing a heavy boulder up a steep hill only to watch it roll down over and over and over again. As a person who is incredibly impatient, the truth of persistent injustice is difficult for me. As a person who loves to intellectualize, I am consistently offended by the fact that I cannot find all the answers to heal the brokenness of this world in all the books that I own. I cannot count the number of times I have been in my therapist's office, sitting on her couch, explaining a complex problem and then asking, maybe demanding, an instant solution. After I go on and on at length for several minutes, I finally pause, I look over to my therapist, and I ask her what she thinks I should do to remedy whatever situation I have just explained in detail. Inevitably, she looks at me and smiles, saying with gentle compassion, "Natalie, I think you are grasping for answers here. I think maybe you are looking for too quick a fix." And while I most often hem and haw at her wildly unsatisfying response, I know that she is, as she always seems to be, right. There are simply no quick fixes for the predicament of being a human in this beautiful and broken world. My own personal and professional work began to change when I realized that there was never really a destination where I would arrive and feel fully accomplished. Rather, my life has become about the journey, about the experience of waking up to each new day and asking God to help me love myself and the world a little bit better, knowing that I will make mistakes, that I will continue to learn, and that that's really all life is anyhow. Friends, still having work to do is not a sign of failure or being a bad person. Still having work to do is what it means to be alive. So what does this reality about progress and change mean for us here? What does it mean for how to be a welcoming congregation in 2017? It means we as a community must rededicate ourselves every day to being welcoming, to the work of education and advocating for justice. It means that some days will be easier than others. It means that some days we will win and some days we will lose. It means we cannot always expect progress to be linear. It means we must continue to demand equality and justice anyway. Friends, there is simply so much we cannot control in this life. We can control the choice we make each day about how boldly we love one another. In a prophetic essay on Black Unitarian Universalist history, the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed writes, "Change is generational, incremental, and bruising. It comes, but not necessarily on our time schedule. We have fallen short and will again, and when we do, we need to pause and pray and ask, what does love demand of me? And then stand up and try again. Impatience is not what sustains us, but rather dreams, hope, work, and companionship, the chance to pour out one's life for the faith, principles, and people whom we value." As we celebrate LGBTQ History Month and National Coming Out Day, as we renew our promise to be a welcoming congregation, I invite you to hold Reverend Dr. Morrison Reed's words close. What does love demand of me? What does love demand of me? Is it to persist in the face of what feels impossible? Is it to work for justice, knowing that the work of justice is never fully realized? Is it to make mistakes and to keep coming back anyway? Is it to find joy in the small but essential moments of human compassion and love? There is still so much work to do to extend our welcome. I do not know exactly what the path ahead looks like, but I do know that I will be here every day, wondering, wandering, exploring. Will you join me? May it be so. Amen.